Legend of Total War here, and today Sega has cancelled Hyenas. Now I imagine most of you guys are sitting here either rejoicing about this or sitting there going, I don't care. But I think that this event here is going to have a ripple effect that is going to affect Creative Assembly and Total War in the long run, and that's really what I want to discuss here today. I'm not really here to rub the salt in the wound and celebrate Hyenas being cancelled, because this is overall a negative thing to occur. Now, personally, from my opinions, I think that Hyenas was obviously a very stupid idea right from the get-go. The whole theme of it reeks of cringe. I don't know who they were targeting with this style. It's coming out in an oversaturated market. Games like the finals are just going to dominate this area. That Hyenas didn't stand a chance. It fell flat on its face right at the start of the race. It had no chance whatsoever. Sega canceling it now is a little bit weird because this was going to be a pay-to-play game, so people would have to buy it, and it definitely had like a small amount of interest, so they could have recouped a little bit of money. And as far as I'm aware, the game is basically finished. So I imagine the reason that Sega has cancelled Hyenas is more of a prestige thing. It's better to not release trash and tarnish your brand than to release a game, make a little bit of money, and it harm your future sales of other games that you have in the works. So I understand this point of view of cancelling it right before it gets out the door. Because yeah, this game would have hurt the Creative Assembly and Sega brand. It wasn't a good idea. It's time to pull the plug on it. Now, how is the cancelling of Hyenas going to affect Creative Assembly and Total War? Many of you may ask. Things to keep in mind about mega big businesses, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an expert on this stuff here, but I do run a business of my own, and I know that you can get very creative with accounting. So what I've got open here is a Sega Semi report that came out today, September 28, 2023. And the main thing that I want to show here is this. So as a result of implementation of the structural reform described above in the consumer area, we expect to record losses of approximately 14.3 billion yen for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. So this fiscal year still has 6 months to go, but this is their expectations, 14.3 billion yen. So if you're not familiar with the conversion rate of yen, you basically divide it by 100 and then you get American dollars. So it's roughly 100 million US dollars. I don't know the exact amount. You can just do a calculator in Google, but it's a lot of money basically. Now, the company itself will be able to survive from this because it's a multi-billion-dollar company. These companies will have good years, they'll have bad years. I'm sure they've had 14.3 billion yen profit in the past, and they'll probably have it again in the future. But what is this going to do now? Well, it's a publicly listed company, and there are people that are investing in Sega Sammy. And as soon as they see this, they realize that they're not going to get the dividends that they want to, because obviously they're investing their money into it, and they don't give a shit about Sega Sammy and what they're doing. And so they're going to pull out their money, they're going to sell and buy company stock in something else that's going to provide a better dividend. And that's usually how investments go, which means that the stock price for Sega Sammy is going to go down pretty massively, I think. Now, there are multiple things that this could have effects on, right? So, first thing is that the true owners of Sega Sammy, the ones who own big stake in the company, these individuals are able to escape paying taxes by having their assets tied to stock. So what these like mega billionaires do is they own a company, essentially. They own like 60%, or they own a huge amount of stock. And you don't have to pay taxes on your stock until you sell them. So you just never sell your stock. So if you own a company and you have a certain amount of stock and you just keep increasing the price of that stock by posting profits, your net worth goes through the roof and you never have to pay taxes on it. And what they do to actually get money is they sort of borrow off their stock. It's a really sort of dirty system, I think, but that's kind of how it works. Now, when the prices go down, they lose massive amounts of net worth, so they're not able to borrow as much and all this kind of stuff. So it's going to affect the executives. Now, executives aren't ones to just roll over and eat a loss. They'll find some way to make somebody else pay for it, right? So who is really going to pay for the failure of Hyenas? Well, really everyone that is involved in Sega, Creative Assembly, and Total War, by extension, is probably going to pay for this in one way or another. And in fact, many of us probably already are paying for it. I imagine that Sega cancelled Hyenas months ago, at the very least weeks ago, because they would not come to this decision and then the very next day just let the public know. No, this would be a decision made a long time ago, at the very least, because I know from my dealings with Creative Assembly, they really make these decisions quite far in advance before they let the public know. So this is not a recent development, which means that Creative Assembly probably knew about this quite a while in advance, and that probably means that this decision has affected what they've been doing in terms of Shadows of Change and Pharaoh specifically. I could not understand for the life of me why Pharaoh was being marketed as a full major Total War game when it was so obviously a Saga game. And now it kind of makes sense. With the cancellation of Hyenas, Sega is probably putting the pressure on Creative Assembly, because they failed with Hyenas, to make money elsewhere in order to mitigate this gigantic loss. And even though they're probably not going to avoid posting a loss, it's much better to post a $14.3 billion yen loss than a 20 billion yen loss. I should really just use dollars. So Creative Assembly, not being able to really get much more quality out of Pharaoh, instead try to squeeze more out of it than they probably should. Drop the Saga brand, sell it as a full game, try to get more money out of it, and just try to get more money per unit sold, which I don't think the Total War community, by and large, has bought into that. And I use that as a double meaning, in that I don't think people are actually going to buy the game. Well, it will sell copies. I just don't think the number of copies is going to be particularly high. But I also don't think that the Total War community is sold on the idea that this is a major historical Total War and not a Saga game. When I look on the Reddit and stuff, most people refer to Total War Pharaoh as a Saga game. It's very small in scope. It doesn't have a lot of variety, at least to begin with. It doesn't appear like a full major historical Total War game at all. So nobody's buying that. And then you look at Shadows of Change. It seemingly came out of nowhere that the price came out at $25, 150% price increase on Lord packs from Warhammer 2. And even though there has been inflation, 150% seemed ridiculous. But now it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Because they knew Hyenas was going to get cancelled, they had to get money from somewhere. And so even if they were selling fewer copies of the DLC, which they absolutely did sell fewer copies, and that could be easily reflected through the player count, it went down. It actually went down because of Shadows of Change. But they, as far as I'm aware, they made a bigger profit of Shadows of Change just because the number of units sold was less important than the amount of profit per unit. So they're sort of mitigating it from Hyenas. So in many ways, we're already paying the price for Hyenas. And I don't think it's going to stop there. Now, I've heard for a while now that Microsoft has had their eyes on Sega. Now, from my understanding is that they had their eyes on like a few years back, they had their eyes on two specific companies, Bethesda and Sega. Now, at the time, Bethesda was, I think, twice the size of Sega. You can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this. I'm just going off memory, which it's not perfect. And so they decided to go with, or maybe Sega was twice the size, I don't know. But they decided to go with Bethesda and wait on Sega. Now, what is the best time to outright purchase a company than right after they've posted a massive loss and their stock price plummets? And what better time to acquire them and get this whole asset really cheap by comparison? So Microsoft is probably looking at this, possibly, again, I'm talking out my ass, it may or may not come to pass, but probably looking at this right now, drooling. They've got the cash, they've just sold Starfield, and they're like, let's buy Sega. And then what we could end up seeing is that Creative Assembly and Total War may be owned by Microsoft as of 2024, 2025, who knows? Or maybe not, who knows? These are rumors that I've heard, and sometimes these rumors come to pass. And it's not unheard of for companies to do this kind of stuff. So yeah, the death of Hyenas, while nobody gives a shit about Hyenas itself, this is probably going to have massive consequences on Sega, Creative Assembly, and Total War. And also, I think it's really important to note as well, I do not think that Hyenas is responsible for the entirety of this. Creative Assembly is not the only company that Sega owns. They own a whole bunch of others, and I imagine that many of those other companies are responsible for just this sort of bad year. And don't get me wrong, bad years happen within companies. You get good years, you get bad years. Sometimes you get really bad years. This stuff happens. Companies can recover from it, especially in the games industry, if you've got talented people working on beloved franchises. Total War is not going anywhere. You know, even if Microsoft was to buy out Sega and Creative Assembly, it seems unlikely that they would can the Total War franchise. But what it could do is give the Total War franchise a big shakeup. Because at the end of the day as well, the last big shakeup that happened with Total War happened at Empire Total War when Sega acquired Creative Assembly. Because Creative Assembly made Rome Total War. Funny thing about Rome Total War, it's one of the most beloved Total War games, but it was so expensive to make that it nearly it did bankrupt Creative Assembly. And so Sega bought out the company. They commissioned them to make a cheap reskin of Rome 1, which actually ended up being Medieval 2, with their sort of like their CA Sophia at the time, which was actually Creative Assembly Brisbane. And that company that branch got cancelled after they made a dud game afterwards. You only need to make one bad game for you to get cancelled, really. But anyway. And then they reworked the Warscape engine for Empire Total War. And, Total War has been much more profitable, not necessarily higher quality, ever since. So lots of things could occur from this. I would urge you guys, if you're interested in Total War. Maybe some of you guys just want to play the game, you don't want to be interested in what's going on. But yeah, just keep an open mind about the effects of this. And if you're sitting there celebrating the death of Hyenas, I understand that you don't like the game. I laughed when I heard this as well. But then I thought about it for a second. I thought, okay, this probably means consequences down the line, and we're probably going to pay for it in one way or another. So just be aware that if you see price increases coming, like further price increases coming from Creative Assembly, it's probably due to this. And so you can push back on it, saying that you're not going to pay for the failure of Hyenas sort of thing. And a way to do that is by buying these DLCs at a sale, or by purchasing on third-party sources, like third-party websites like Games Planet. Which, by the way, Creative Assembly prefers, I've heard, that you do that because they get a better cut than if you purchase it directly from Steam. So it's like a win-win situation. So if you want to help Creative Assembly out, don't actually purchase your DLCs on your main games from Steam. It's weird, but anyway. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Just wanted to give you guys some food for thought. I guess I am both glad Hyenas is dead and also sorry for Creative Assembly, sort of, because I feel like this isn't going to be good for anyone. But at the same time, who thought that this game would be a good idea? Who? I hope that person is getting a bit of a talk to at the moment. But anyway, that's the end of this one. Hope you guys are doing well. Appreciate you. And just remember the most important thing here. Be kind to one another. I also want to give a shout out to Voland. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Most of you guys know Voland. I've been chatting with him behind the scenes a fair bit, and he's been actually really lovely to talk to. So I just want to give him a shout out as well. Anyway, that's the end of this one. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, guys.